Today, I fired my own brother. I did not do it at the kitchen table over Sunday dinner, and I did not do it in a private text message. I did it in a glass-walled boardroom in front of 20 of Wall Street's most ruthless stakeholders. I watched the blood drain from his face as I signed the acquisition papers that legally made me his boss. He had spent the last 10 years treating me like the help, mocking my career, and using me as his personal bank account. So when the security guards escorted him out of the building with his cardboard box of belongings, I did not feel guilt. I took a sip of this 1996 Chateau Margaux wine I am holding right now. It tasted sharp at first biting and heavy on the tongue, but the aftertaste was sweet, pure, unadulterated sugar. That is the taste of justice. My name is Nia, and for 29 years I have been the invisible child in a family that only worships loud success. To the outside world, my brother Marcus is the golden boy, the charismatic creative director, the man who is going anywhere. To them, I am just Nia, the quiet administrative assistant who probably needs help paying her rent. They see my silence as weakness. They see my privacy as failure. They have no idea that the shell company I founded 5 years ago just bought the debt on their precious lifestyle. But before I tell you how I bought his company from right under his arrogant nose, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to smile at a family member who underestimated your worth while secretly holding all the cards. To understand why I destroyed him so publicly, you have to understand the dinner that started it all. The memory is so vivid I can still smell the truffle oil and desperation. It was 2 weeks ago at Le Bernardin. 5 stars, $400 a plate. The kind of place where the waiters move like ghosts and the menu has no prices. Marcus had called the dinner to celebrate his promotion to junior partner at Blue Sky Agency. I sat there swirling my ice water watching my brother order the most expensive bottle of Cabernet on the list without even looking at the vintage. He did not know wine, he just knew price tags. Beside him sat his wife, Emily. Emily is the kind of woman who smiles with her mouth, but never with her eyes. She is blonde, petite, and treats every service worker like they are invisible. And tonight she was treating me the same way. Across from them sat my mother, Mama Estelle, beaming at her son like he had just invented electricity. "So this is it," Marcus announced, his voice too loud for the hushed dining room. "Junior partner, that means a corner office, that means equity. I am finally sitting at the big table, Mama. No more playing games." Mama Estelle clapped her hands together, her bracelets jingling. "Praise God, Marcus, I knew it. I told the pastor just last Sunday, my boy is destined for greatness. The Lord does not give talent to those who waste it." She turned to me, her smile fading just a fraction. "Nia, aren't you proud of your brother? He is going to be running that agency soon." "I am happy for you, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I knew for a fact that Blue Sky Agency was hemorrhaging money. My analysts had been tracking their decline for months. Making Marcus a partner was not a promotion. It was a strategy to give him liability for the debt. But I could not say that. Not yet. Emily leaned forward, her eyes scanning me up and down. She lingered on my dress. It was a vintage piece I had found at an estate sale in Paris, a silk slip dress from the 70s that draped perfectly. To the untrained eye, it looked simple. To anyone who knew fashion, it was a masterpiece. But Emily did not know fashion. She knew logos. "Nia, honey," Emily said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I meant to text you earlier. If you were struggling to find something to wear for a venue like this, you should have asked me. I have a bag of old clothes I was going to donate to the shelter. Some of it is barely worn. It would be a step up from whatever this is." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from the sheer audacity. She was wearing a polyester blend dress from a fast fashion chain that she probably bought yesterday, and she was looking down on a $3,000 vintage garment. "It is vintage, Emily," I said calmly, picking up my napkin. "Oh, vintage," she laughed, looking at Marcus. That is what we are calling thrift store finds now. That is cute. No, really, it is brave of you. I would be too embarrassed to wear second-hand clothes to Le Bernardin, but you have always been so practical. Mama Estelle chimed in, patting my hand condescendingly. Now, Emily, be nice. Nia does not have your budget. She is doing the best she can on a secretary's salary. Nia, baby, maybe you should take Emily up on her offer. You need to look professional if you ever want to find a husband. Men like a woman who looks expensive, not dusty. I gripped the stem of my water glass so hard I thought it might shatter. This was their narrative. This had always been their narrative. Nia, the charity case. Nia, the failure. Nia, the dusty spinster. It did not matter that my investment portfolio was larger than the GDP of a small country. It did not matter that I owned the penthouse 3 blocks away that overlooked this very restaurant. To them, I was just a prop in the Marcus show. I watched Marcus swirl his wine mimicking a connoisseur. He didn't even let it breathe. Listen, Nia, he said, pointing a breadstick at me. When I get settled in the new role, I will see if we have any opening in the cleaning crew or maybe the mailroom. It is union work. Good benefits. You could use some dental coverage, right? The table erupted in laughter. Even Mama Estelle chuckled, covering her mouth with her napkin. It was a joke to them. My dignity was the punchline. I looked at Marcus. I looked at his cheap suit that didn't fit him in the shoulders. I looked at Emily's fake designer purse resting on the floor. And I looked at my mother, who was so blinded by the golden child that she couldn't see the rot underneath. That sounds like a great opportunity, Marcus, I said, my voice smooth as silk. But I think I will stick to my current path. I hear the cleaning crew at Blue Sky has a high turnover rate, just like their executive board. The laughter stopped abruptly. Marcus narrowed his eyes. What is that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said, finally taking a sip of my water. Just something I read in the financial news. But who am I to talk business? I am just the practical sister wearing thrift store clothes. Emily scoffed, rolling her eyes. God, you are such a downer, Nia. We are trying to celebrate. Can you just stop being jealous for one night? It is not Marcus's fault. He is the star of the family. Jealous. The word hung in the air like bad perfume. I looked around the restaurant at the crystal chandeliers and the soft velvet chairs. I realized then that this was not a family dinner. This was a performance, and I was tired of playing my role. I signaled the waiter for the check, knowing exactly what was coming next. This was the ritual. The abuse, the humiliation, and then the bill. But tonight the script was going to change. Tonight was the beginning of the end for Marcus. He just didn't know it yet. The waiter approached with the leather folder. He placed it delicately in the center of the table. The bill for 4 people at Le Bernardin, with 2 bottles of wine and appetizers, was likely over $4,000. Marcus didn't even look at it. He patted his jacket pockets, enacting a pantomime I had seen 100 times before. Oh, shoot, he said, his acting terrible. I must have left my wallet in the valet line. Or maybe on the dresser. Babe, do you have your card? Emily shook her head dramatically. I changed purses last minute, sweetie. I thought you had it. They both turned to Mama Estelle, but she was busy admiring her manicure. Then 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. The expectation was heavy, suffocating. Nia, Marcus said, sliding the leather folder across the white tablecloth toward me. Handle this for me, will you? I will Venmo you tomorrow when I get to the office. I looked at the black folder. I knew he wouldn't Venmo me. He never did. He owed me nearly $10,000 in unpaid loans from the last 5 years alone. You want me to pay? I asked, raising an eyebrow. With my secretary's salary. Come on, Nia, don't make a scene, Emily hissed, leaning in. You have savings. You never go anywhere or do anything. Just pay it. It is embarrassing to keep the waiter waiting. Mama Estelle sighed. Nia, just do as your brother says. He is good for it. He is a partner now. He will probably pay you back double. Stop being so stingy. It is ugly. Stingy. Ugly. Jealous. I reached into my purse, but I didn't reach for the debit card they thought I used. I reached for a small, sleek card holder hidden in the zippered lining. My heart was pounding not from fear but from adrenaline. I was about to show them a glimpse of the truth, just a flash like lightning before the thunder. I pulled out the folder and opened it. The total was $4,520, a ridiculous amount for a Tuesday night. I looked at Marcus, who was already back to checking his phone, assuming the problem was solved. "I am not paying this, Marcus," I said clearly. He looked up stunned. "What?" I pushed the folder back. "I am not paying for your celebration. If you are a partner, act like one. Pay your own bill." The silence at the table was deafening. People at the next table turned to look. Emily's face turned a blotchy red. "Are you serious?" she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "You are going to humiliate us over a few $1,000s after we invited you. You invited me to be an audience, not a guest," I countered. Mama Estelle slammed her hand on the table. "Nia, that is enough. You are ruining everything. Why must you always be so difficult?" The waiter was hovering now, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, is there a problem?" he asked Marcus. Marcus looked panicked. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, then angry. "Nia, give me the card. Now. Do not make me ask you again." I stared at him. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. He didn't have the money. He didn't have the credit. He was a fraud wrapped in a cheap suit. "Fine," I said. I opened my purse again. But instead of my usual card, I pulled out a heavy matte black titanium card. The Centurion. The card that requires an invitation and a spending limit that could buy this entire building. I kept my hand over the logo so they couldn't see what it was, but the sound it made when I placed it on the silver tray, a heavy metallic clink, made the waiter's eyes widen. "I will pay," I said, staring directly at Emily, "but consider this a loan, and my interest rates are higher than the bank's." I watched the waiter take the card with reverence. He knew what it was. He looked at me with new eyes, realizing instantly that the power at this table did not reside with the loud man in the suit, but with the quiet woman in the vintage dress. As the waiter walked away, Emily laughed nervously. "See? Was that so hard? God, you are dramatic." I didn't answer. I just smiled. Because I knew something they didn't. That swipe wasn't just paying for dinner. It was the first transaction in the acquisition of their entire lives. The game had officially begun. The silence that followed the waiter's departure was heavier than the crystal chandelier hanging above our heads. For a solid minute, nobody spoke. The only sound was the clinking of silver spoons against china as neighboring tables enjoyed their desserts, oblivious to the power shift that had just occurred at table 4. Marcus shifted in his seat, loosening his tie as if the air in the room had suddenly become too thin. He refused to look at me, instead fixating on a small spot on the tablecloth, picking at a loose thread with his manicured fingernails. Emily was the first to break the tension, though her attempt was as clumsy as her attempts at sophistication. She let out a sharp, breathless laugh that sounded more like a cough. "Well," she said, her voice an octave higher than usual, "that was certainly theatrical. I hope you didn't max out your credit limit just to make a point, Nia. Those high-interest cards can be a trap for people who don't understand finance." I watched the waiter return, gliding across the floor with a purpose he hadn't possessed 5 minutes ago. He bypassed Marcus entirely, turning his back on the man who had ordered the wine, and stopped directly at my right hand. With a slight bow, he placed the black titanium card back on the tray, along with the receipt. He didn't ask for a signature. At this level of spending with this specific card, a signature was often a formality they waived for esteemed guests. "Thank you, Ms. Brooks," the waiter said, his tone dripping with a newfound respect. "Your vehicle has been brought around to the front. We took the liberty of having the valet warm it up for you." I nodded, sliding the card back into its hidden sleeve in my purse. "Thank you," I said softly. Marcus's head snapped up. "Wait," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "What do you mean, her vehicle? I gave the valet my keys. We drove here together." The waiter didn't even look at him. He kept his eyes trained on me. Mrs. Brooks has a standing arrangement with our valet service, sir. I stood up, smoothing the silk of my vintage dress. The fabric felt cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the burning heat of my family's gaze. I didn't drive here with you, Marcus, I said, picking up my clutch. I had my driver drop me off, and I think I will take my own car home. The air in your sedan is a little stifling tonight. Mama Estelle scrambled to her feet, grabbing her purse. Now, Nia, don't be like that. We are a family. We arrive together, we leave together. Whatever little game you are playing with that credit card, it is done now. Do not embarrass your brother in the parking lot. We walked out of the dining room in a jagged formation. I led the way, head held high, while they trailed behind like unruly children. As we stepped out into the cool Chicago night air, the valet stand was buzzing with activity. But right in front, idling with a low predatory purr, was a matte black SUV with tinted windows. It wasn't flashy, but it was expensive. It was the kind of car that whispered power rather than screaming for attention. Marcus stopped dead on the sidewalk. He looked at the SUV, then at his own leased luxury sedan parked awkwardly behind a delivery truck. Is that yours?" he asked, pointing at the black beast. "It is a company car," I lied smoothly. The company was mine, so technically it wasn't a lie. Emily scoffed, crossing her arms to ward off the chill. A company car for a secretary. What are you doing driving the CEO around? Something like that, I murmured as the valet opened the rear door for me. Listen, Nia, Marcus said, stepping forward and grabbing the door before I could slide inside. He leaned in, his breath smelling of the expensive wine I had just paid for. About the bill. I am serious about paying you back. But you know how it is with the buy-in for the partnership. My liquidity is a little tied up right now. I looked at his hand on my car door. His knuckles were ashy. I know exactly how it is, Marcus, I said. You are investing in your future. Exactly, he beamed, thinking he had won me over again. It is an investment, and when I am running things at Blue Sky, you will be the first one I take care of. This money, think of it as the black tax. Right? We lift each other up. I climb, you climb. The black tax. The term made my stomach turn. It was a concept born of survival, the idea that the first person in a black family to make it out of poverty had a moral obligation to support everyone else. But in my family, it had been twisted. It wasn't about lifting each other up. It was about Marcus standing on my shoulders to reach a height he hadn't earned while crushing me into the dirt. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a stepping stool. I looked him dead in the eye. You are right, Marcus, it is a tax. But even the IRS audits people eventually. I pulled the door shut, forcing him to step back. As the car pulled away, I watched them through the tinted glass. Marcus was kicking the tire of his leased sedan, yelling something at Emily, while Mama Estelle stood by, clutching her purse, looking small and confused. They looked like what they were, people playing dress-up in a world they didn't understand. The drive to my grandmother's house took 30 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. I needed the silence to calculate my next move. Technically, the house belonged to me. I had bought it from Grandma Dorothy's estate 3 years ago when she passed paying off the reverse mortgage she had taken out to fund Marcus's failed record label. I had put the deed in my name, but I let Mama Estelle and Marcus live there rent-free. It was my one concession to family duty, my one weakness. But as my driver turned onto the familiar street in the south side lined with oak trees and modest brick bungalows, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a large, battered dumpster sitting in the driveway of my house. I leaned forward, squinting through the darkness. The front lawn, usually manicured because I paid a landscaping service, was littered with cardboard boxes. The porch light was on and I could see shadows moving past the living room window. Stop here, I told the driver. I got out of the car a block away. I wanted to walk up. I wanted to see what was happening before they knew I was there. My heels clicked softly on the pavement as I approached the house that held all my childhood memories. The house where Grandma Dorothy had taught me to read stock market tickers in the back of the newspaper while Marcus was outside playing ball. As I got closer, I saw Emily coming out the front door carrying a box. She dumped it unceremoniously into the dumpster. A framed picture fell out the glass, shattering on the metal rim. It was a photo of me and Grandma Dorothy at my high school graduation. I froze. The rage that surged through me wasn't the cold, calculating anger of the boardroom. This was hot. This was personal. I walked up the driveway, stepping over a pile of old clothes, my old clothes that had been thrown onto the grass. Emily didn't see me until I was standing right at the base of the dumpster. "What do you think you are doing?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. Emily jumped, clutching her chest. "Jesus, Nia. You scared me. Why are you lurking around in the dark like a cat burglar?" I pointed at the dumpster. "I asked you a question. Why are you throwing away my grandmother's things? And why is there a dumpster in my driveway?" She rolled her eyes, wiping dust from her hands onto her jeans. "Oh, relax. We are just doing some spring cleaning. Marcus and I are making space. If he is going to be a partner, we need a home office. We can't have all this old junk cluttering up the energy." Junk. I stepped closer, the smell of old dust and memories rising from the dumpster. "That is not junk. That is my history. And you didn't answer me. Why are you clearing out the whole house?" "Because we are selling it." Marcus's voice boomed from the porch. I looked up. He had arrived before me, clearly having driven like a maniac to beat me home. He was standing on the top step, his suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up. Mama Estelle was standing behind him, looking guilty. "Selling it," I repeated the word, tasting like ash in my mouth. "Yeah, selling it," Marcus said, walking down the steps. "Look, Nia, I need liquidity for the buy-in. 50,000 cash. The bank won't give me a loan because of my credit score, which is your fault, by the way, for not co-signing that car loan last year. So Mama and I talked. We are selling the house. We already got a cash offer from a developer. They want to tear it down and put up condos. We close in 2 weeks." I looked at Mama Estelle. She refused to meet my eyes, fiddling with the cross necklace around her neck. "Mama," I whispered, "you agreed to this. You agreed to sell Grandma's house." The house she worked 3 jobs to keep. Mama Estelle sighed a long, ragged sound. "Nia, baby. Listen. It is just bricks and wood. Marcus has a chance to be something big. He is the man of the family now. We have to support him. The Bible says we have to make sacrifices for our kin." Sacrifice. That was the other word they loved. But in this family, sacrifice was a one-way street. I was always the altar and Marcus was always the God demanding blood. "You can't sell this house, Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. He laughed, a cruel barking sound. "Watch me. I'm the man of this house. Mama gave me the go-ahead. It's done." He didn't know. He genuinely didn't know. He thought Mama Estelle still owned the deed. He thought he could just snap his fingers and liquidate my property to fund his delusion. I looked at the shattered photo of Grandma Dorothy in the dumpster. I looked at Emily smirking as she kicked a box of my old books aside. And I looked at Marcus standing there with his chest puffed out, thinking he had won. A calmness washed over me. It was the same calm I felt right before I executed a hostile takeover. They wanted to play real estate fine. I was about to give them a lesson in property law that they would never forget. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. "Who are you calling?" Emily asked, her smirk faltering slightly. "The police?" "No," I said, unlocking the screen. "I am calling a locksmith, because as of this moment, you are all trespassing." Marcus stepped forward, his face twisting into a mask of aggression. "What did you say to me?" I said. "Get off my property, Marcus, before I have you removed by force." He stopped, confusion warring with anger in his eyes. "Your property? What are you talking about? Mama owns this house." I turned the phone screen toward him. It was a digital copy of the deed dated 3 years ago. The name on the owner line was clearly visible: Nia Brooks. "I bought this house when Mama was about to lose it to foreclosure. I said, my voice cutting through the night air like a knife. I paid off the arrears. I paid the taxes. I own every brick, every shingle, and every blade of grass you are standing on. And you just tried to sell it without my permission. That is called fraud, Marcus. And in the state of Illinois, that is a felony. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a ghost. Mama Estelle gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Nia. You never told us. I didn't think I had to, I said, stepping past Marcus to stand on the porch of my home. I thought providing a roof over your heads was enough. But apparently you are so eager to burn bridges you didn't notice you were standing on one I built. I looked down at them, my brother, my mother, my sister-in-law. They looked small from up here. Put the boxes back, I commanded. Every single one. If I find one scratch on Grandma's furniture, I will evict you tonight. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time in his life, the golden boy had nothing to say. But I knew this wasn't over. I could see the gears turning in his head, shifting from shock to desperation. He needed that $50,000, and a desperate man is a dangerous man. As I walked into the house and slammed the door, I knew the war had officially moved from the boardroom to the living room, and I was ready for a siege. The transition from the crumbling brick of my grandmother's porch to the 45th floor of the Onyx Tower was not just a change in location, it was a shift in dimension. 12 hours ago, I was Nia, the overlooked sister, standing in a driveway, fighting over a dumpster. Now, as the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, I was Nia Brooks, the founder and managing partner of Onyx Holdings. The air here smelled different. It smelled of filtered oxygen, expensive espresso, and the metallic tang of fear. I stepped out of the private elevator, and my heels struck the Italian marble floor with a rhythm that sounded like a war drum. I wore a tailored white suit that cost more than Marcus's car. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and my vintage glasses were replaced by contact lenses that allowed me to see every micro-expression on my employees' faces. "Good morning, Ms. Brooks. Good morning, Ms. Brooks." The greetings came in a wave as I walked down the corridor. Analysts looked up from their multiple monitors. Junior associates straightened their ties. I did not stop to chat. I did not ask about their weekends. In this world, silence was power, and I was the loudest thing in the room. My executive assistant, Julian, was waiting at the door of my corner office. Julian was 25, sharp as a razor, and the only person in this building who knew the full extent of my family drama. He held a tablet in one hand and a steaming cup of herbal tea in the other. "Your schedule is clear until noon, Nia," he said, falling into step beside me. "The merger with the tech firm in Austin is finalized. The legal team just needs your signature, and the forensic audit you requested on Blue Sky Agency is complete." I stopped. My hand hovered over the door handle of my office. "It is done?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Julian nodded, his expression grave. "It is done. And Nia, it is ugly." I pushed open the door and walked into my sanctuary. The office was a masterpiece of minimalism. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, the city looking like a circuit board of gray and glass. I placed my purse on the mahogany desk and took the tablet Julian offered. "Show me," I commanded. Julian tapped the screen, bringing up a series of financial charts that bled red ink. "Blue Sky isn't just struggling," he explained, pointing to a steep, downward curve. "They are insolvent. They have been cooking the books for 18 months to hide a $3 million deficit. Their primary investors pulled out last quarter. Technically, they should have filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy weeks ago." I stared at the numbers. The columns of debt were staggering. Vendor payments were 90 days overdue. Rent on their fancy downtown office hadn't been paid in 2 months. "So why haven't they folded?" I asked, scrolling through the data. "Because they are looking for a scapegoat," Julian said. He swiped to the next page. "This is the partnership agreement they offered your brother." I read the document. It was standard legalese to the untrained eye, but to me it screamed entrapment. The contract offered Marcus a 20% equity stake in the company. It gave him the title of senior partner. It gave him a corner office. But in exchange, it assigned him full fiduciary liability for all outstanding debts incurred by his department. I laughed a dry, humorless sound. They are setting him up. Exactly, Julian said. The current CEO creates a new position, promotes a hungry, ambitious employee who doesn't understand corporate law and transfers the liability. When the creditors come knocking next month, they won't sue the CEO. They will sue the partner who signed the guarantee. Marcus. I walked over to the window looking down at the ant-like cars crawling on the street below. Marcus was down there somewhere, probably bragging to a barista about his big promotion. He thought he had finally made it to the top. In reality, he was standing on a trapdoor and the rope was already around his neck. He thinks he is a genius, I murmured. He thinks he charmed his way into this role. Julian stood silently waiting for my directive. If I do nothing, I said, turning back to face him, Marcus goes to prison, or at the very least he loses everything he has ever owned and spends the next 20 years paying off legal fees. Julian nodded. That is the most likely outcome, unless someone intervenes. I looked at the tablet again. I looked at the name Blue Sky Agency. It was a mediocre marketing firm with a decent client list but terrible management. It was worthless on paper, but to me it was valuable, not for its assets, but for the leverage it provided. What is the asking price for a full buyout, I asked. Julian hesitated. Because of the debt, you could pick it up for pennies on the dollar. The current owners are desperate to cash out before the ship sinks. If you absorb the debt, you could own 100% of the company for less than $2 million. $2 million. It was a significant amount, but Onyx Holdings had just closed a deal worth 50 times that. Do it, I said. Julian blinked. You want to save him? No, I said, walking back to my desk and sitting in the leather chair that felt like a throne. I don't want to save him. I want to own him. I picked up my gold fountain pen and tapped it against the desk. Initiate a hostile takeover. I instructed, my voice steady and cold. Use Shell Corp Alpha. I do not want the name Onyx Holdings or Nia Brooks appearing on any paperwork until the acquisition is finalized. I want to be the ghost partner. Julian began typing furiously on his tablet. Buy the debt from their creditors first, I continued. That gives us leverage. Then approach the CEO with a cash buyout offer for his shares. He will take it. He is a coward who wants to run with his golden parachute. Make sure the contract stipulates that all current employment agreements remain valid until the new board takes over. You want to keep Marcus employed? Julian asked. For now, I said. I want him to sign that partnership agreement. I want him to sit in that big office and feel the power he craves. I want him to host his little celebration party. And then, when the ink is dry, I want to be the one to tell him that his new boss is the sister he tried to evict. Julian looked up, a small smile playing on his lips. You are terrifying, Nia. I am a businesswoman, Julian, I corrected him. And I just spotted a distressed asset with high emotional returns. Get the legal team on this immediately. I want the deal closed in 48 hours. Before Marcus has time to realize he is celebrating his own funeral. As Julian left the room to execute my orders, I turned my chair to face the window again. I watched the clouds drift over the city. My family thought they knew me. They thought I was soft. They thought I was the girl who needed their permission to exist. They had no idea that I was the storm that was about to break over their heads. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Mama Estelle. We are still praying for you, Nia. Hope you come to your senses about the house. Family comes first. I looked at the message and deleted it without replying. Family did come first. That was exactly why I was buying the company. I was going to teach my family a lesson that no amount of Sunday sermons could ever cover. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Julian, get my car ready, I said. I need to go shopping. If I am going to be the new owner of a marketing agency, I need a suit that says I own the building, not just the lease. Yes, Ms. Brooks. I leaned back, closing my eyes for a brief second. The game was set. The pieces were moving, and the checkmate was going to be legendary. Information is the only currency that matters in my world. You can have money, you can have titles, and you can have the corner office, but if you do not know who is sleeping with whom or where the bodies are buried, you are flying blind. And my brother Marcus was flying into a hurricane without a radar. 48 hours after I initiated the hostile takeover of Blue Sky Agency, I sat in the back of my SUV with the windows tinted to a pitch-black opacity. Outside, the Chicago wind was whipping rain against the glass, blurring the streetlights into streaks of neon. Inside, the air was still and smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Sitting opposite me was Mr. Vance, a private investigator whose rates were exorbitant because his discretion was absolute. He did not ask why a sister was investigating her brother. He simply did the job. He slid a heavy manila envelope across the center console. The sound of the paper sliding against the leather was the only noise in the car. "You are not going to like this, Ms. Brooks," Vance said, his voice gravelly and low. "We ran a full forensic audit on your brother's personal finances, cross-referencing them with the company accounts you provided access to. It is messy." I picked up the envelope. "I did not hire you to tell me what I like, Mr. Vance. I hired you to tell me the truth." I opened the clasp and pulled out a stack of documents. The first few pages were standard bank statements, overdraft fees, maxed-out credit cards, late payments on the lease for his luxury sedan. This was expected. Marcus had always lived champagne dreams on a beer budget. But as I flipped to the second section, the numbers began to tell a darker story. "Here is the smoking gun," Vance said, pointing a thick finger at a highlighted column. "For the past 18 months, Marcus has been withdrawing funds from a dormant company account labeled Client Acquisition. He has been categorizing them as consulting fees to a vendor called E&M Solutions." I looked at the total. $215,000. "Who owns E&M Solutions?" I asked, though a cold knot was already forming in my stomach. Vance handed me a photocopy of a business registration. "It is a sole proprietorship registered to an Emily Miller, your sister-in-law's maiden name." I stared at the paper. E and M. Emily and Marcus. They weren't just living above their means. They were embezzling corporate funds to do it. "They use the money to fund their lifestyle," Vance continued. "The designer bags, the trips to Cabo, the down payment on that car he drives. They have been bleeding the company dry." And here is the kicker. The company's internal auditors are scheduled to do a deep dive next month, before the fiscal year ends. I closed my eyes, the pieces of the puzzle snapping into place with a sickening click. That was why Marcus was so desperate for the $50,000 from selling my grandmother's house. He wasn't trying to buy into the partnership. He was trying to pay back a fraction of what he stole before the auditors arrived. He was trying to plug a hole in the Titanic with bubblegum. "He is going to prison," I whispered. "If this comes out, he is looking at 5 to 10 years for grand larceny and wire fraud." Vance shifted in his seat. "It gets worse, Ms. Brooks." I opened my eyes. How could it possibly get worse? Vance reached into his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. "Embezzlement is a crime of opportunity, but what I found next, this is a crime of intent." He tapped the screen and handed it to me. It was a video file taken with a long-range telephoto lens. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. The location was a boutique hotel in downtown Chicago, the kind of place that specializes in afternoon rendezvous for people who do not want to be seen. On the screen, I saw a black sedan pull up to the valet. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. I recognized him immediately. It was Richard Sterling, the current CEO of Blue Sky Agency, the man who was supposedly mentoring Marcus, the man who was offering him the partnership. A moment later, the passenger door opened. A woman stepped out wearing a trench coat and oversized sunglasses. She looked around nervously before taking Richard's arm. It was Emily. I felt the bile rise in my throat. My sister-in-law, the woman who preached about family values, the woman who threw my grandmother's photos into a dumpster. She was sleeping with her husband's boss. "Play the audio," Vance said softly. We managed to get a directional microphone on them while they were waiting for the elevator. I pressed play. The audio was slightly grainy, mixed with the ambient noise of the hotel lobby, but the voices were unmistakable. Audio voice. "Richard. Relax, baby. You are shaking." Audio voice. "Emily. I am nervous, Richard. What if he doesn't sign? What if he figures it out? Marcus is dumb, but he is not brain dead." Audio voice. "Richard. He will sign. His ego is too big to refuse. I told him the partnership comes with a corner office and his name on the door." He was practically drooling. "Once he signs that liability waiver, the debt becomes his. All of it. The $3 million in operating losses and the $200,000 you guys stole." Audio voice. "Emily. And we are sure the audit will pin it on him." Audio voice. "Richard. The paper trail leads straight to his department. I have already backdated the memos. When the ship goes down next month, Marcus will be the captain going down with it. And you and I will be in the Caymans with the payout from the buyout." Audio voice. Emily laughing. "God, I can't wait. Listening to him brag about being a boss is exhausting. I just need him to sell that stupid house so we have some cash for the flight." Audio voice. "Richard. Just keep playing the supportive wife for 2 more days. Once the ink is dry, you can file for divorce and leave him to the wolves." The recording ended. I sat there in the silence, staring at the frozen image of Emily and Richard laughing together. I thought I had felt anger before. I thought I had felt rage when I saw the dumpster in my driveway. But this was something else entirely. This was a cold, clinical realization that my brother was not just a villain in my story. He was the clown in everyone else's. He was being set up to take the fall for a massive corporate fraud orchestrated by his wife and his boss. They were going to frame him, bankrupt him, and send him to prison while they ran off with the money. And the worst part, Marcus was so blinded by his own arrogance, so desperate to prove he was better than me, that he was walking right into the slaughterhouse with a smile on his face. I handed the tablet back to Vance. My hand was steady. My heart rate hadn't even spiked. The disgust I felt for Emily had burned away any residual sympathy I might have had for Marcus. "Do you want me to take this to the police?" Vance asked. "No," I said. "Not yet." Vance looked surprised. "Ms. Brooks, this is conspiracy to commit fraud. If you intervene now, you can save your brother." I looked out the window at the rain-streaked city. Save him. Why would I do that? Marcus had spent his entire life telling me I was worthless. He had tried to sell my home. He had stolen from his company. He was a thief and a bully, but he was also family. And in my world, you do not let outsiders destroy your family. You do it yourself. I don't want to save him from the trap, Vance," I said, turning back to him. "I want to be the one to spring it." I pulled out my checkbook and wrote Vance a check for his services. It was a staggering amount, but the information he had given me was priceless. "Keep the evidence safe," I instructed. "Make copies. I want high-resolution prints of those photos, and I want a transcript of that audio recording on my desk by tomorrow morning." "What are you going to do?" Vance asked as he tucked the check into his pocket. "I am going to attend a signing ceremony." I said, a small, dangerous smile touching my lips. "My brother wants to be a partner. I am going to give him exactly what he wants. He is going to get the title, the office, and the responsibility. And then I am going to introduce him to his new owner." I opened the car door and stepped out into the rain. The cold water felt good on my face. It felt like a baptism. The old Nia, the sister who begged for scraps of affection, was dead. The woman who walked into the Onyx Tower lobby was a predator who had just spotted her prey. I took the elevator up to my office and called Julian. "Change of plans," I said as soon as he picked up. "Yes, Ms. Brooks." "We are not just buying the debt," I said. "I want the acquisition to close during the signing ceremony. Time it perfectly." I want the notification to hit Richard Sterling's phone exactly 1 minute after Marcus signs the partnership agreement. Understood, Julian said. And what about the employment contracts? Keep them, I said. But draft a termination letter for Richard Sterling, effective immediately upon acquisition. And draft a second document for Marcus. A termination letter, Julian asked. No, I said. A repayment schedule. If he wants to be a big-shot businessman, he is going to learn about debt restructuring the hard way. I hung up the phone and walked over to the window. I could see the lights of the city blinking below me. Somewhere down there, Emily was probably packing a bag, dreaming of island beaches and illicit money. Somewhere down there, Marcus was probably practicing his signature, practicing the face he would make when he told me I was fired. They had no idea that the sky was falling, and I was the one pulling it down. I sat down at my desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of stationery. I began to write a list. It wasn't a to-do list. It was a hit list. 1. Secure the asset Blue Sky. 2. Expose the affair. 3. Liquidate the traitors. I looked at the photo of Emily and Richard one last time on my phone. They looked so happy, so smug. Enjoy it, I whispered to the empty room. It is the last happy moment you will ever have. I checked the time. The signing ceremony was tomorrow at noon. Less than 24 hours to go. I needed to pick out my outfit. Emily had told me to wear a waitress uniform. She wanted me to serve. Fine. I would serve. I would serve revenge cold and brutal on a silver platter, and I would make sure they ate every single bite. The kitchen of my grandmother's house had always been a place of refuge. It was where Grandma Dorothy taught me how to season a cast-iron skillet and how to balance a checkbook. It smelled of sage thyme and decades of Sunday dinners. But tonight the air was thick with a different kind of heat. It was the suffocating humidity of unspoken truths and impending disaster. I stood at the stove stirring a pot of gumbo. It was a peace offering. Despite everything, the dumpster in the driveway, the stolen money, the affair, I had invited Marcus and Emily over for dinner. Call it a biological imperative. Call it a final audit of my conscience. I needed to know with 100% certainty that there was nothing left of my brother worth saving before I destroyed him. Marcus sat at the small wooden table, drumming his fingers on the surface. He was wearing a new watch, a flashy gold timepiece that I knew he couldn't afford. It was likely bought with the funds he had embezzled from Blue Sky. Emily sat across from him, scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. She looked bored, as if dining with her sister-in-law was a form of community service she was forced to endure. So Marcus said, breaking the silence, "This smells good. Better than that takeout you usually eat. I guess you are trying to get on my good side before the big signing tomorrow, huh?" I kept my back to him, stirring the roux slowly. The dark brown liquid swirled in the pot, thick and heavy. "I don't need to get on your good side, Marcus," I said calmly. "I just wanted to talk, sister to brother, before everything changes." Emily snorted without looking up from her phone. "Changes for the better, you mean?" "Once Marcus is a partner, we are going to be moving in different circles, Nia. We might not have time for these little kitchen suppers anymore." I ignored her. I turned around, leaning against the counter, wiping my hands on a dish towel. I looked at Marcus, really looked at him. I saw the bags under his eyes that the expensive suit couldn't hide. I saw the tremor in his hand when he reached for his water glass. He was terrified, but his pride was driving the car, and he was asleep at the wheel. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "I have been reading some things in the financial journals about the industry, about Blue Sky specifically." His hand froze halfway to his mouth. "What things? Rumors?" I lied. "But rumors from credible sources. People are saying Blue Sky is over-leveraged. They are saying the creditors are circling like sharks. Are you sure about this partnership offer? Did you have a lawyer look at the liability clause in your contract?" Marcus slammed the glass down. Water sloshed onto the table. Who have you been talking to? Why are you digging into my business? I am not digging, I said, taking a step toward him. I am worried. Sometimes companies promote people not because they value them, but because they need someone to take the fall. If Blue Sky goes under, and you are the signatory on the debt, you lose everything. Not just the job. You lose your reputation. You lose your freedom. I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Just for a second. The scared little boy who used to hide behind my skirt when thunder rattled the windows was still in there, buried under layers of narcissism and cheap cologne. Maybe you should delay the signing, I suggested softly. Just for a week. Let me have a friend of mine look at the books, just to be safe. For a moment I thought he was going to listen. He looked at Emily, his eyes searching for validation. But Emily was the devil on his shoulder, and she wasn't about to let her ticket to the Cayman Islands slip away. "Oh my God," Emily groaned, throwing her phone onto the table. "Do you hear her, Marcus? She is doing it again. She is trying to sabotage you. She can't stand the fact that you are going to be the boss. She wants you to stay down here in the dirt with her." The doubt in Marcus's eyes vanished, replaced by a flare of ugly, defensive anger. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the linoleum floor. "She is right," he spat, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "You are just jealous. You have always been jealous. You think because you went to college and got your little degree that you are smarter than me? You are nothing. You are a paper pusher. I am a visionary. I am trying to protect you, Marcus," I said, my voice hardening. "You are walking into a trap. The only trap is this family," he shouted. He grabbed the bowl of gumbo I had placed on the table for him. It was still hot. With a violent swing of his arm, he swept it off the table. The ceramic bowl shattered against the wall. Thick, dark roux and seafood splattered across the vintage wallpaper, dripping down like sludge. A piece of shrimp landed on my shoe. "You are just like your father," Marcus yelled. His face twisted into a mask of hate. My stepfather. The man who had raised me when Marcus's biological father abandoned them. The man Marcus had always resented because he was kind, steady, and boring. He was a coward who never took a risk in his life. Marcus continued, stepping over the broken pottery to get in my face. "And you are just like him. Scared. Small. Selfish. You don't want me to fly because you are afraid of heights. Well, guess what, Nia? I am already flying. And you are just the weight I have to cut loose." I stood there feeling the heat of his rage, but I felt cold inside. Ice cold. The last tether that bound me to him, the thin thread of sibling loyalty, snapped. It didn't make a sound. It just dissolved. Emily stood up and walked over to him, placing a hand on his arm, but her eyes were on me, gleaming with malice. "Baby, don't waste your breath," she cooed, smoothing his lapel. "Look at her. She is 30 years old, single, and cooking dinner for her brother on a Friday night because she has no one else. She is pathetic. Of course she wants you to fail. If you succeed, she has no one left to feel superior to." She looked me up and down, a smirk playing on her lips. "Men don't like women who think they know everything, Nia. That is why you are alone, and that is why you will always be alone. Come on, Marcus. Let's go. This place smells like desperation." Marcus looked at the mess he had made on the wall. For a second he looked ashamed. But then he looked at Emily, and the arrogance returned, shielding him from the guilt. "Don't expect an invite to the ceremony tomorrow," he muttered, turning his back on me. "I only want supporters there, not haters." They walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing amidst the wreckage of the meal I had made with love. I heard the front door slam and the sound of his engine revving aggressively as they sped away. I didn't move for a long time. I stared at the gumbo dripping down the wall. It looked like a wound. I picked up a rag and bent down. I started to clean. Not because I was a servant as they believed, but because I respected this house. I respected the woman who had built it. And I respected myself too much to live in their filth. As I wiped the floor, a strange sense of peace settled over me. I had done my duty. I had offered the lifeline. Marcus had slapped it away. He had chosen his path. He had chosen Emily. He had chosen the lie. I stood up and rinsed the rag in the sink. The water ran clear. My conscience was clear. I walked over to the calendar on the wall. Tomorrow's date was circled in red ink. The signing. I took a black marker from the drawer. I didn't cross the day out. Instead, I drew a crown above it. You called me a coward, Marcus, I whispered to the empty room. You called me small. Tomorrow you are going to see exactly how big I am. I pulled out my phone and dialed Julian. It was late, but I knew he would answer. Ms. Brooks. Is everything ready for tomorrow? I asked. Yes, ma'am. The acquisition paperwork is drafted, the termination letters are printed, and the security team is on standby. Good, I said. Add one more thing to the agenda. What is that? I want the air conditioning in the boardroom turned down to 60 degrees. Julian paused. That is very cold, Nia. I know, I said, staring at the stain on the wall where the bowl had shattered. I want him to shiver. I want him to feel the cold before the freeze sets in. I hung up the phone and turned off the kitchen light. I left the mess on the wall for now. I would hire a professional cleaning crew to handle it later. Just like I was about to hire a professional team to handle Marcus. He wanted to be a partner. He wanted to play in the big leagues. Good luck, partner, I said into the darkness. I walked up the stairs to my bedroom, my steps light and purposeful. I needed to get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow was going to be a very busy day. I had a company to buy, a brother to fire, and a crown to claim. The ink on the acquisition contract was still wet when Marcus received the call that would seal his fate. In my office at Onyx Tower, the atmosphere was surgical. My legal team sat around the mahogany table reviewing the final addendum I had insisted upon. The clause was buried deep in page 42, subsection C. It stated that the new ownership group, purely for the sake of continuity, required the current senior partner designate Marcus Brooks to assume full operational and fiduciary liability for the creative department's existing debts. In exchange, the angel investor would inject $5 million to keep the company afloat. It was a death sentence disguised as a promotion, and Marcus was about to sign it with a gold pen. I watched the live stream from the hidden camera I had installed in the Blue Sky conference room weeks ago. Richard Sterling, the CEO, was on the phone with Marcus. I could see Richard suppressing a smile, the kind a shark makes before it bites. They love you, Marcus. Richard lied, his voice smooth over the speakerphone. This investment group, they specifically asked for you. They said your vision for the rebrand is the only reason they are buying in. But they need to know you are committed. They need you to sign the full liability waiver. It is just a formality, shows you have skin in the game. I watched Marcus on the other end, pacing in his living room, my living room. He was beaming. He didn't ask about the solvency of the investors. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He just heard, "They love you," and his ego did the rest. Done, Marcus said, his voice booming. I told you, Richard, I am the asset. Send the papers over. I am ready to lead. I signaled to Julian. Execute the wire transfer, but keep the funds in escrow until the signature is verified. The trap was set. Now I just had to endure the victory lap. Saturday arrived with the humidity of a sauna. Marcus decided that a simple dinner wasn't enough to celebrate his ascension. He ordered a massive barbecue. Not at a park, and certainly not at his own cramped apartment, but in the backyard of the house he had tried to sell 2 days ago. My house. He invited everyone. The neighbors, his old fraternity brothers, the church choir, even the mailman. He wanted an audience. Nia, Marcus shouted from the patio, holding a beer in one hand and a pair of tongs in the other. Stop standing around. The ribs need turning. And check the coolers. Uncle Ray needs another soda. I stood by the industrial-sized grill smoke, stinging my eyes. The heat was unbearable, radiating off the charcoal and the pavement. I was wearing an old t-shirt and denim shorts, sweat sticking my hair to my neck. To the 50 people swarming my lawn, I looked exactly like what Marcus said I was, the help, the loser's sister. I am on it, I said, flipping a rack of ribs. The grease popped, burning my arm. I didn't flinch. Pain was just a reminder to focus. I watched Marcus holding court by the inflatable pool. He was wearing a linen suit that was already wrinkling in the heat, surrounded by a group of admiring cousins. It wasn't easy, Marcus bragged, his voice carrying over the thumping bass of the music. These investors, they are heavy hitters. Silicon Valley money. But they saw my portfolio and they said, "Marcus, name your price." I told them I don't want money, I want control. I want to steer the ship. "That is right," shouted one of his friends. "Boss moves." Only, I flipped another burger, suppressing a dry laugh. He wanted to steer the ship, but he didn't know he was captaining the Titanic after it had already hit the iceberg. Near the hydrangeas, Mama Estelle was talking to Pastor Jenkins. She was wearing her Sunday best, a wide-brimmed hat, shading her face from the sun I was standing in. "It is truly a blessing," Pastor Mama said, fanning herself with a paper plate. I prayed on it. I said, "Lord, give my boy the recognition he deserves. And look at him now, partner, equity. He is going to restore this family's name." The pastor nodded solemnly. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, Sister Estelle. And what about Nia, is she—" Settling down, Mama Estelle lowered her voice, but the wind carried her words straight to me. "Oh, Pastor, you know how Nia is. She is spirited, but she doesn't have Marcus's drive. She is content just floating. I try to tell her to be more like her brother, to take charge of her life, but she just wants to argue. Look at her over there, almost 30 and still flipping burgers at her brother's party because she doesn't have a family of her own to cook for." "We will keep her in our prayers," the pastor said. I slammed the spatula down on the metal tray. The sound was lost in the noise of the party, but it rang in my ears. Content floating, no drive. I walked over to the cooler, grabbed a soda, and walked it over to Uncle Ray. As I passed Marcus, he grabbed my arm. His grip was tight, possessive. "Hey," he slurred slightly, the beer already getting to him. "Make sure you bring out the potato salad next. And try to smile, Nia. You are bringing down the vibe. This is a celebration. Try to act like you are happy for me, even if you are dying inside." I looked at his hand on my arm. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead. "I am happy for you, Marcus," I said. And for the first time in days, I meant it. I am happy you finally got exactly what you deserve. He released me, clapping me on the shoulder hard enough to sting. "That is the spirit. Maybe when I get my signing bonus, I will buy you a new grill. This one is looking a little rusty, like this whole house." He wandered off to accept a toast from a neighbor. I went back to the grill. The flames leaped up, licking the grate. I wasn't just cooking meat anymore. I was cooking a disaster. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text from Julian. "Update, the escrow account is funded. The documents are on Richard's desk. Signing is confirmed for tomorrow at 9 a.m. The angel investor is ready to acquire." I looked up at the party. I saw the laughter, the dancing, the arrogance. I saw my mother pointing at the house, my house, and telling a neighbor how Marcus was going to renovate it. I saw Emily showing off her ring to a group of women who looked bored. They were feasting. Let them feast. Let them eat the ribs and drink the beer and bask in the summer sun, because winter was coming tomorrow morning. I took the last burger off the grill and placed it on the platter. Service was over. "Food is ready," I called out. As the crowd descended on the table like locusts, I wiped my hands on my apron and walked away. I walked past the party, past the lies, and into the cool, dark sanctuary of the garage. I sat in the driver's seat of my black SUV and locked the doors. I didn't turn the engine on. I just sat there in the silence, watching them through the windshield. "Enjoy the barbecue, Marcus," I whispered. "It is the last meal you will ever eat as a free man." The 45th floor of the Onyx Tower was silent. It was not the empty silence of a graveyard, but the charged potential energy of a missile silo seconds before launch. The only illumination in the cavernous office came from the screen of my iPad, casting a ghostly blue glow across my face. I sat in the darkness, swiping through the final merger documents, one last time. My finger traced the line that defined total acquisition. Every decimal point was perfect, every loophole was closed, Every trap was set. I spun my chair slowly, the leather creaking softly in the quiet room. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Chicago skyline blinked back at me. From this height, the cars looked like blood cells moving through the arteries of a concrete beast. Somewhere down there in the tangle of lights, my brother was probably sleeping the deep, untroubled sleep of the delusional. He thought he had won the lottery. He had no idea he was holding a ticket to his own execution. My phone buzzed against the mahogany desk, vibrating like an angry insect against the wood. The sudden sound shattered the stillness. I glanced at the screen. The caller ID flashed a picture of a smiling blonde woman. Emily. It was past midnight. She was not calling to apologize for the scene in the kitchen. She was not calling to thank me for the barbecue. She was calling because she wanted something. In Emily's world, people like me only existed to provide services. I pressed the speaker button, keeping my eyes fixed on the contract on my iPad. Hello, Emily. Nia. Thank God you are awake. Her voice was shrill, manic, with nervous energy. It sounded like she had been drinking champagne or perhaps pacing the floor with anxiety. Listen, we have a situation for tomorrow. I leaned back, crossing my legs. What kind of situation? It is the signing ceremony, she said, rushing her words. Richard just texted me. He is paranoid about corporate espionage. He says we can't have any agency catering staff in the room during the actual signing. Too many sensitive documents on the table. He doesn't want some random waiter reading the terms and leaking them to the press. I suppressed a smile. The terms were already leaked. They were sitting on my desk. And the only person Richard should be paranoid about was the woman he was sleeping with. So what do you need, Emily? I asked, though I already knew the answer. We need someone we can trust to handle the refreshments, she said. Just coffee, water, maybe some pastries. Someone who is, family. Someone who knows how to be discreet and stay in the background. She wanted a servant. She wanted me to debase myself one last time. She wanted the future CEO of the company to pour coffee for the man she was cheating on my brother with. The irony was so rich I could taste it. You want me to be the waitress? I stated flatly. Don't call it that, Nia. You are always so dramatic. Think of it as facilitating. You are helping your brother on the biggest day of his life. Besides, you know how Richard is. He likes things a certain way. And frankly, we can't trust anyone else. She paused, waiting for me to fight back. She expected the Nia who flipped burgers at the barbecue. She expected the Nia who argued about dumpsters. She didn't know she was talking to the owner of the building. I tapped the screen of my iPad, highlighting the clause regarding immediate termination of executive staff. I understand, Emily, I said, my voice smooth and devoid of emotion. Security is paramount. You can't be too careful about who sees what. Exactly, she exclaimed, relieved. I knew you would understand. So be there at 8:30 sharp. The ceremony starts at 9. And Nia, yes, please dress appropriately. Wear black and white, like a uniform. We want everything to look professional, none of those urban prints you like to wear. We need you to blend in. We don't want you drawing focus away from Marcus. Blend in, be invisible, be the help. I looked at the garment bag hanging on the back of my office door. Inside it was a white bespoke power suit from Italian wool, tailored to fit me like a second skin. It was a suit designed for war. I will wear black and white, Emily, I promised. I will be the most professional person in the room. Great. Oh, and bring that coffee maker you have, the one from your kitchen. The office machine is broken, and Richard hates instant. Thanks, Nia. You are a lifesaver. She hung up without saying goodbye. The line went dead, returning the room to silence. I set the phone down and stood up. I walked over to the window and pressed my forehead against the cool glass. You want me to serve? I whispered to the city lights. Fine. I will serve. I will serve you a reality check so cold it will freeze the blood in your veins. I turned back to the desk and picked up the office landline. I dialed a number that bypassed the reception and went straight to the personal cell of my lead attorney, David. David, I said, I know it is late. Nia, is everything all right? His voice was groggy but alert. Everything is perfect, I said. I have a change to the document package for tomorrow morning. Go ahead. I need you to print the termination notices for Richard Sterling and Marcus Brooks, but I don't want them on standard office paper. Okay, David said slowly. What do you want? I want them on the heaviest cardstock we have. 100-pound weight. Linen finish. Cream color. Heavy cardstock. Why? Because I said visualizing the moment when I slide them across the table, I want them to make a sound. I want them to land with a thud. I want them to feel heavy in their hands. I want them to feel like a tombstone. Understood, David said. Anything else? Yes. The evidence file from the private investigator. The photos of Emily and Richard entering the hotel room. The transcripts of their conversation about framing Marcus. You want those in the package? I want them blown up, I said. 8 by 10 glossy prints. High resolution. I want Marcus to see the pores on his wife's face while she kisses his boss, and I want them in a separate red folder. Place it at the bottom of the stack. That is brutal, Nia. David said, a hint of awe in his voice. It is necessary, I corrected. And David. Yes. Make sure you and the security team are waiting in the lobby at 8:55. Do not come up until I text you the code word. What is the code word, checkmate? I hung up the phone. My work was done, the script was written, the stage was set, and the actors were asleep dreaming of the applause that would never come. I walked over to the closet in the corner of my office. I opened the door and pulled out a simple black skirt and a white button-down blouse. It was the kind of outfit I used to wear when I worked temp jobs right out of college. It was the uniform of the Invisible Woman. I held it up against my body, looking at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. Tomorrow, this skirt would be my camouflage. I would walk into that room as the sister they despised. I would pour their water. I would serve their coffee. I would fade into the wallpaper while they laughed and congratulated themselves on their cleverness. And then when the clock struck 9, I would shed this skin. I placed the waitress outfit on the couch next to my briefcase. I sat back down in my chair and picked up the iPad again. I didn't read the contract this time. I opened the security feed from the Blue Sky offices. The boardroom was empty and dark. A long glass table sat in the center surrounded by 12 ergonomic leather chairs. At the head of the table was the CEO's chair. It looked imposing. Tomorrow that chair would be mine. I zoomed in on the camera feed until the chair filled the screen. Sleep tight, Marcus, I said softly. Enjoy your last night as a free man. Enjoy your last night believing you are the king. Because tomorrow you are going to learn that a pawn can take down a king if she moves quietly enough. I turned off the iPad. The room plunged into total darkness. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat there in the dark, breathing in the silence, waiting for the sun to rise on my kingdom. The service elevator of the Blue Sky Agency building smelled of floor wax and stale ambition. I stood alone in the metal box watching the numbers climb. In my hands I balanced a heavy silver tray laden with a carafe of ice water crystal glasses and the thermal coffee pot Emily had specifically requested from my kitchen. I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. The black skirt was nondescript, the white blouse was starched stiff, and my hair was pulled back so tight it pulled at my temples. To the world I was the help, to the people upstairs I was a joke. But inside my chest, my heart was beating with the slow, rhythmic thud of a judge's gavel. The elevator dinged at the penthouse level. The door slid open, revealing the reception area I had secretly purchased 48 hours ago. I stepped out onto the plush carpet, keeping my head lowered. The receptionist, a young woman with acrylic nails who was busy chewing gum, didn't even look up as I walked past. I was invisible. Perfect. I approached the main conference room. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, allowing anyone in the hallway to see the theater playing out inside. And it was theater. Marcus was already seated at the head of the long mahogany table. He had arrived early to claim the throne. He was leaning back in the leather executive chair, his feet clad in Italian loafers I knew he hadn't paid for, were resting casually on the polished wood. He was surrounded by 4 junior account executives, young men in cheap suits who were hanging on his every word, hoping some of his imaginary success would trickle down to them. I pushed the glass door open with my hip. The first thing that hit me was the cold. The temperature in the room was exactly 60 degrees, just as I had ordered. It was frigid. I saw the junior executives rubbing their arms trying to keep warm. But Marcus was sweating. He was sweating from the nerves he was trying so hard to hide, and the cold air was turning that sweat into a clammy sheen on his forehead. He stopped talking mid-sentence as I entered. He looked at me, his eyes scanning the waitress uniform with a mixture of relief and disdain. He didn't see his sister. He saw a prop. "About time, Nia," he snapped, not bothering to take his feet off the table. "I told Emily to have you here at 8:30. It is 8:40. You are already slacking off on the first day of the new regime." I walked to the sidebar, setting the tray down with a deliberate clatter. "Traffic was bad," I murmured, keeping my voice submissive. "Traffic," he mocked, turning to his sycophants. "You hear that, traffic? That is the excuse of people who take the bus. Winners buy a helicopter. Or at least a condo closer to work." "Right, boys." The junior executives laughed nervously, looking between me and Marcus. They didn't know who I was. They just saw a woman being berated, and they followed the alpha's lead. Marcus snapped his fingers, a sharp cracking sound that echoed in the silent room. "Hey, Earth to Nia. I need ice. My throat is dry from talking strategy all morning. Bring the pitcher over here, and chop chop. The big guns are going to be here any minute." I picked up the heavy crystal pitcher. The ice cubes clinked against the glass. I walked over to him. The cold air from the pitcher numbed my fingers, but I didn't feel it. I focused on his shoes on the table. The disrespect was physical. I poured the water into his glass. I let it fill to the brim, dangerously close to overflowing, forcing him to move his hand quickly to avoid a spill. "Watch it," he barked, pulling his hand back. "God, you are clumsy. Can't you even pour water right? No wonder you are still single. You have zero grace." I didn't apologize. I just stepped back, clutching the pitcher against my white blouse. The door opened again and Emily walked in. She looked frantic, her eyes darting around the room until they landed on me. She let out a visible sigh of relief. "Oh, good. You are here." She walked over to me, grabbing my arm and pulling me a few inches to the left, posing me like a mannequin. "Stand here, Nia. Out of the direct sunlight. We don't want shadows on the table when they take the photos." She turned to the room, clapping her hands. "Okay, everyone, listen up. The investors' legal team is in the lobby. Richard is bringing them up. I want everyone to look sharp, jackets on, ties straight. And Marcus, honey, please take your feet off the table. We need to look professional." Marcus groaned but swung his legs down. He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. It was tight around the waist. He walked over to Emily and kissed her on the cheek. "Don't worry, babe. I got this. I was born for this." Emily smiled at him, patting his chest, but her eyes were looking over his shoulder at me. She smirked, a cruel, twisting expression that she reserved just for me. "Look at her, Marcus," she said, gesturing to where I stood by the wall. "Doesn't she look natural? I told you she would fit right in. Some people are just born to lead, and some people are born to serve. It is just genetics, I guess." The room erupted in laughter. It wasn't polite laughter. It was the ugly, jeering laughter of a mob. Even the receptionist outside looked in and giggled. "Yeah," Marcus chuckled, taking a sip of his water. "I guess Mom was right. Nia always did like cleaning up messes. Speaking of messes, Nia, make sure you wipe down the table after we sign. I don't want any fingerprints on the varnish." I tightened my grip on the pitcher. I imagined swinging it. I imagined the sound of the crystal shattering against his jaw. But that would be too easy. That would be assault. I wanted total destruction. So I swallowed the rage, pushing it down into the pit of my stomach where it burned like acid. "I will make sure everything is clean, Marcus," I said. spotless. Suddenly, the energy in the room shifted. The junior executives straightened their spines. Emily smoothed her skirt. Marcus puffed out his chest. Richard Sterling walked in. He was the picture of corporate sleekness. Silver hair, tan skin, a suit that cost more than my grandmother's car. He exuded the easy confidence of a man who thinks he has gotten away with murder. "Good morning, Team Richard," boomed his voice, filling the room. He didn't look at the junior staff. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at Marcus. "Marcus, my man, ready for the big day. Ready? I was born ready." "Richard," Marcus said, striding forward to shake his hand. He gripped Richard's hand with both of his, pumping it enthusiastically. "Thank you for this opportunity. I won't let you down." Richard smiled. It was the smile of a predator looking at a wounded gazelle. "I know you won't, Marcus. That is why I chose you. You have got the hunger. You have got the drive." Richard's eyes drifted past Marcus and locked onto Emily. For a brief second, the professional mask slipped. He winked. It was subtle, just a flicker of an eyelid, but Emily caught it. She bit her lip, a flush rising on her neck that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. "Everything is set," Emily said, her voice breathy. "The contracts are on the table. The pens are ready. We are just waiting for the new owners to arrive." "New owners?" Marcus scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "Passive investors, right, Richard? That is what you said. They just put up the cash and we run the show." Richard cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "Exactly. They are silent partners. They trust our judgment. Specifically, they trust you, Marcus. That is why the liability clause is so important. They want to know the man in charge has total accountability." Marcus puffed up again. "I have no problem with accountability. Put it all on my shoulders. I can carry it." I stood in the corner holding the water pitcher, watching my brother dig his own grave with a shovel Richard had handed him. It was almost tragic. He wanted to be important so badly that he was blind to the fact that he was being set up as the fall guy. Richard finally turned and noticed me. He squinted as if trying to place where he had seen me before. "And who is this?" he asked, pointing a manicured finger in my direction. "Oh, that is just—" Emily said quickly, stepping between us. "Marcus's sister. She is helping out with the catering today, since we couldn't trust outsiders." Richard nodded slowly. "Ah, the sister. Good. Keep it in the family." He looked at me dismissively. "Sweetheart, get me a coffee. Black, 2 sugars. And make it hot. It is freezing in here." I felt a muscle twitch in my jaw. "Sweetheart." I set the water pitcher down and picked up the coffee pot. I walked over to the side table where Richard was standing. He didn't move out of my way. I had to reach around him to grab a cup. "Here you go, sir," I said, pouring the dark liquid. He took the cup without looking at me, continuing his conversation with Marcus. "So Marcus, after the signing, Emily and I were thinking of heading down to the Cayman Islands for a few days, just to scout some offshore banking options for the firm. We figure you can hold down the fort while we are gone." "Offshore banking?" Marcus asked, impressed. "Wow. We are going international already." "We have to stay ahead of the curve," Richard said smoothly. "And don't worry, once you sign those papers, you will have full authority to make executive decisions in my absence. You are going to be the acting CEO effectively." Marcus looked like he was going to faint from happiness. "Acting CEO." He mouthed the words to himself. I stepped back into the shadows. They were so brazen. They were planning their getaway right in front of him, and he was too busy polishing his ego to notice. Emily sidled up to Richard, pretending to check a document on the table, but I saw her hand brush against his lower back. It was intimate, possessive. "We should get started," Emily whispered. "The investors' rep should be here any second." "Right," Richard said, clapping his hands. "Everyone take your seats. Marcus, head of the table. That is your spot now." Marcus practically ran to the chair. He sat down, placing his hands on the leather armrests, surveying the room like a king surveying his kingdom. "This feels right," he announced. "This feels like destiny." I checked my watch. 8:58. My legal team was 2 minutes away. The elevator was ascending. The executioners were at the door. I looked at Emily, who was pouring herself a glass of water, trying to hide the tremor in her hands. I looked at Richard, who was checking his flight status on his phone under the table. And I looked at Marcus, the brother who had told me I was nothing. They thought I was the help. They thought I was part of the furniture. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold air. I wasn't the help. I was the eviction notice. I set the coffee pot down on the tray. I unbuttoned the top button of my stiff white blouse, just slightly loosening the chokehold. "Can I get anything else?" I asked, my voice cutting through their chatter. Before the meeting starts, Marcus waved his hand without looking at me. "Just stay out of the way, Nia, and be quiet. The adults are about to do business." I smiled. A genuine, terrifying smile that nobody saw because nobody was looking at me. "Understood," I whispered. The digital clock on the wall flipped to 9:00. The heavy glass doors of the boardroom didn't just open. They swung wide. And for the first time in his life, Marcus was about to meet the real boss. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom clicked shut behind me, sealing the toxicity inside. I stood in the reception area for exactly 3 seconds, breathing in the scent of filtered air and victory. The receptionist with the gum stopped chewing and stared at me, confused by the sudden shift in my posture. I was no longer slouching. I was no longer making myself small. I reached up and pulled the pins from my hair, letting the long braids cascade down my back. Then, with a single fluid motion, I unbuttoned the cheap white blouse Emily had forced me to wear. Underneath, I was wearing a bespoke white suit from Alexander McQueen. It was sharp, architectural, and cost more than the collective student loans of everyone in that conference room. I stepped out of the black waitress skirt, revealing the matching white trousers. I kicked the sensible flats into the corner and slipped on the 4-inch stiletto heels I had stashed in my briefcase. The elevator doors at the end of the hall slid open. My team stepped out. It was a formation that would have made the Secret Service jealous. 4 lawyers in charcoal suits led by David, my lead counsel, who looked like a pit bull in a necktie. Flanking them were 2 security guards, massive men with necks as thick as tree trunks and earpieces coiled behind their ears. They didn't smile. They didn't speak. They just fell into step behind me as I turned back toward the boardroom. I checked my watch. 9:05. Inside that room, Marcus had just signed the document. I knew it. I could feel it in my bones. He had signed his name on the line that transferred all liability to him. The trap had snapped shut. Now it was time to collect the pelt. I walked toward the double glass doors. I didn't rush. I walked with the rhythm of a predator who knows the prey has nowhere to run. Click, click, click. The sound of my heels on the marble floor was the only warning they were going to get. David handed me a thick folder. The red one. The one with the photos. "Ready. Ms. Brooks?" he asked, his voice low. "Kick the door down, David," I said. He didn't literally kick it, but he might as well have. He pushed the double doors open with enough force that they bounced against the magnetic stops with a thunderous bang. The sound sucked the oxygen right out of the room. Time seemed to slow down. I saw everything in high-definition frames. I saw Marcus' pen still hovering over the paper, his mouth half open in a laugh that died in his throat. I saw Emily holding her glass of water, her eyes widening as they landed on my white suit. I saw Richard Sterling, the color draining from his face, as he recognized the lawyers behind me. I walked in. I didn't walk to the side. I didn't walk to the corner. I walked straight down the center of the room toward the head of the table. My team fanned out behind me, a wall of dark suits framing my white silhouette. Marcus was the first to find his voice, though it cracked like a teenager's. "Nia, what the hell are you doing?" He stood up, knocking his chair back. "We are in the middle of a meeting. Get out. And why are you dressed like that?" I didn't answer him. I didn't even look at him. I looked at Richard Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice projecting clearly to every corner of the room. "I believe you are sitting in my chair." Richard stammered, looking from me to the security guards. "Excuse me, who are you, security? Get this woman out of here." The security guards didn't move, they just stared at him with bored indifference. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "Naya, are you deaf? Get out. You are embarrassing me. This is the most important moment of my life and you are playing dress-up." David stepped forward. He placed a briefcase on the table with a heavy thud. He opened it and pulled out a single document on thick cream-colored linen paper. "Mr. Brooks, Mr. Sterling," David announced, his baritone voice silencing the room. "Please remain seated. The ownership of Blue Sky Agency has changed hands as of 2 minutes ago." Richard laughed nervously. "That is impossible. The investors aren't even here yet. We are waiting for the wire transfer." "The wire transfer is complete," David said. He slid the document toward Richard. "Onyx Holdings has acquired 100% of the assets, debts, and operational control of Blue Sky Agency." Richard froze. He looked at the document. He looked at the signature at the bottom. Then he looked at me. His eyes bulged. "Onyx Holdings," he whispered. "That is a shell corp." "Who owns Onyx?" David smiled, a shark showing its teeth. "May I introduce the founder and managing partner of Onyx Holdings, Ms. Nia Brooks." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had landed but hadn't detonated yet. Marcus looked at David. Then he looked at me. He blinked once, twice, as if his brain was refusing to process the visual data. "Nia," he asked, his voice small. "You—" He looked at Emily for help. Emily's hand was shaking so hard the water in her glass was creating a tsunami. She tried to set the glass down, but she missed the coaster. The glass tipped over. Ice water spilled across the polished mahogany table, soaking the papers Marcus had just signed. "No," Emily whispered. "No, that is not possible. She is a secretary. She drives a used car. She lives in that old house. She doesn't have money." Marcus latched onto that thought like a lifeline. "Yeah," he said, his confidence rushing back in a frantic wave. "This is a prank, right? Did you hire these actors, Nia? Is this your idea of a joke because I didn't let you be a partner? You bought a fancy suit and hired some guys to scare us. You are broke, Nia. You couldn't buy a lemonade stand, let alone a company." I walked around the table. I stopped right behind Richard's chair. I placed my hand on the backrest. "Get up, Richard," I said softly. Richard looked at the document again. He saw the bank authorization code. He saw the seal of the state. He knew real power when he saw it. He scrambled out of the chair so fast he almost tripped over his own feet. I sat down. I crossed my legs. I clasped my hands on the table right next to the puddle of water Emily had made. I looked down the long table at my brother. He was still standing, looking wild-eyed and sweaty. "Sit down, Marcus," I commanded. He sat. It was instinct. "Where did you get the money?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and fear. "Who gave you the money? Did you steal it? Is that why you wanted access to the accounts?" I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that made the junior executives flinch. "Steal it." "No, Marcus. I earned it. While you were busy spending your stipend on bottle service and pretending to be a rapper, I was building a portfolio. While you were begging Mama for gas money, I was closing mergers in Tokyo and London." I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. "You asked where the money came from. It came from the deals you were too busy to read about. It came from the market trends you were too arrogant to study. It came from the intelligence you thought I lacked because I didn't have a corner office." I picked up the soaking wet contract he had signed. "You see, brother, you called me a secretary. You called me the help. You said I couldn't understand big business." I tossed the wet paper back at him. It splattered water onto his expensive suit. "Well, the secretary just bought your boss. The help just bought the building. And the sister you called worthless just wrote a check for $2 million to buy your debt." Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish on a dock gasping for air. Emily finally spoke. Her voice was shrill, desperate. Nia. Wait. If you own the company, that is great. That is amazing. We can keep it in the family. Marcus is the senior partner now. You heard Richard. He signed the papers. We can run this together. You and Marcus. The Brooks dynasty. I looked at Emily. I looked at the fake diamond ring on her finger. I looked at the way she was already trying to pivot to latch onto the new host, now that the old one was dead. The Brooks dynasty. I repeated, tasting the words. That sounds lovely, Emily. Except for one small problem. What she asked, her smile trembling. I reached for the red folder David had placed on the table. I don't partner with people who steal from me, I said. I opened the folder. And I definitely don't partner with people who are sleeping with the former CEO to frame my brother for embezzlement. I slid the first 8x10 glossy photo across the wet table. It slid perfectly, stopping right in front of Marcus. It was the photo of Emily kissing Richard in the hotel lobby. The room gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the lungs of everyone present. Marcus looked down. He stared at the photo. He stared at his wife. He stared at his boss. And then finally the golden child broke. The photo of Emily and Richard sat on the wet mahogany table like a landmine that had finally detonated. For a long, agonizing moment, the only sound in the boardroom was the hum of the air conditioning blowing that 60-degree air onto Marcus's sweating forehead. He stared at the image. He stared at the way Richard's hand rested on his wife's waist. He stared at the way Emily was laughing, her head thrown back in a moment of genuine conspiratorial joy that I had never seen her share with him. I watched the realization hit him in waves. First came the confusion, then the denial, and finally the crushing weight of humiliation. The golden child. The man who believed the sun rose and set on his command was looking at irrefutable proof that he was nothing more than a convenient idiot. That is not real. Emily stammered, her voice pitching up into a frequency that hurt my ears. She lunged for the photo, her fingernails scraping against the wood, but Marcus slammed his hand down on top of it. The sound was like a gunshot. He looked up at her. His eyes were red-rimmed with tears and rage. Not real, he whispered. That is your coat. That is the coat I bought you for Christmas. That is the hotel where you said you were having a spa day with your sister. Richard Sterling, sensing the volatility of the situation, tried to stand up. Now listen, everyone needs to calm down. These are personal matters. They have no place in a business meeting. Nia or Ms. Brooks, whatever you call yourself, this is unprofessional. I swiveled my chair to face him. Unprofessional, I asked, my voice deadly calm. You know what is unprofessional, Richard. Sleeping with your employee's wife to manipulate him into signing a fraudulent liability contract. That is not just unprofessional, that is actionable. I pressed a button on the remote control embedded in the armrest of the CEO's chair. The large projection screen behind me descended from the ceiling. The lights in the room dimmed automatically, casting us all in a spectral glow. Let's look at the timeline, shall we? I said. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't just photos. It was a timeline of text messages, bank transfers, and calendar invites that my private investigator had scraped from the cloud. Slide 1. A text from Richard to Emily dated 3 months ago. He is perfect for the fall guy role. Arrogant enough to sign anything, stupid enough not to read it. Slide 2. A bank transfer of $10,000 from Richard's personal account to an offshore holding company registered in Emily's name. Slide 3. A text from Emily to Richard. I will get him to sell the sister's house. We can use that cash for the flights. Just make sure the debt is fully in his name before we leave. The room was silent. The junior executives were staring at the screen with their mouths open. They were witnessing a public execution and they couldn't look away. I stood up and walked over to the screen, the white light illuminating my suit like armor. You see, Marcus, I said, pointing to the messages, you weren't promoted because of your talent, you weren't promoted because of your vision. You were promoted because you were the only person in this building blind enough to walk into a burning building because someone told you there was a throne inside. Marcus made a sound that was half sob, half growl. He looked at Emily. She was shrinking back against the wall, shaking her head, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "Babe, please," she cried. "It is not what it looks like. She faked those. You know how good she is with computers. She is trying to tear us apart." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Computers didn't sign your name on the hotel registry, Emily," I said, "and computers didn't sign Marcus's name on this contract." I picked up the soaking wet document from the table. The ink was running, but the signature was still legible. "David," I said, turning to my lawyer, "please explain the legal standing of this document to my brother." David stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. He looked at Marcus with the dispassionate gaze of a coroner. "Mr. Brooks, under the terms of the partnership agreement you executed 5 minutes ago, you assumed full liability for the debts of the creative division. As of this morning, that debt stands at $2.1 million. Marcus's head snapped toward David. $2 million, no. No, Richard said the company was profitable. He said we were expanding. Richard lied. David said simply. And because you waived your right to due diligence and failed to consult legal counsel, that debt is now your personal responsibility. Onyx Holdings, as the new parent company, intends to collect that debt immediately." I stepped closer to Marcus. I could smell the fear on him. It smelled like sweat and expensive cologne turning sour. "That means," I said, leaning in so only he could hear the steel in my voice, "I own you, Marcus. I own your car. I own your bank accounts. I own the clothes on your back. And since you don't have $2 million, I will be garnishing your wages for the rest of your natural life." Marcus looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. "Nia, please. You can't do this. I am your brother." "Brother?" I repeated the word as if it were a foreign language. A brother doesn't try to sell his sister's home out from under her. A brother doesn't steal from the company accounts to buy his mistress a diamond necklace. I signaled to David again. He handed me another file. The blue one. Speaking of theft, I continued opening the file. Our audit uncovered a discrepancy of $200,000 in the client acquisition fund. The money was traced to a shell company owned by Emily Miller. I tossed the file onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud sliding through the puddle of water. "Embezzlement is a felony, Marcus," I said. "And while I could send you to prison for it, I have decided to be generous. I am not pressing criminal charges." "Yet." Marcus let out a breath, his shoulders sagging. "Thank you, Nia. Thank you." "Don't thank me," I interrupted, "because I am not pressing charges, but I am enforcing company policy." I straightened up, towering over him in my heels. "Marcus Brooks, for gross misconduct, embezzlement of corporate funds, and incompetence, resulting in financial liability, you are hereby terminated from your position at Blue Sky Agency. Effective immediately." "Fired," Marcus whispered. "Fired," I confirmed. "You are not a partner. You are not a boss. You are unemployed. And you are trespassing." The reality finally shattered him. The debt, the betrayal, the job. It was all gone in the span of 10 minutes. He looked at Richard, who was inching toward the door, the man who had played him for a fool, the man who had slept with his wife. A primal roar ripped from Marcus's throat. It wasn't human. It was the sound of a wounded animal cornered in a trap. "You son of a bitch!" Marcus screamed. He launched himself across the table. He didn't care about the glass or the water or the lawyers. He flew at Richard Sterling with a violence born of total humiliation. He tackled the older man to the ground, his fists flying wildly. Richard shrieked, trying to cover his face as Marcus pummeled him. "You ruined me!" Marcus screamed, landing a punch on Richard's jaw. "You laughed at me. You slept with her. The room erupted into chaos. The junior executives scrambled back, pressing themselves against the glass walls, terrified. Emily screamed a piercing theatrical wail. Stop him! Stop him! He is going to kill him! I didn't move. I stood at the head of the table watching the brawl with cold detachment. It was pathetic. Two men in expensive suits rolling on the floor like children fighting over the scraps of a life they had both forfeited. Emily ran to me. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into the sleeve of my white suit. Nia, do something, call off your guards. Help him. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. I looked at her tear-streaked face. This was the woman who had told me to wear a uniform. This was the woman who had called me Dusty. Get your hands off me, I said quietly. She recoiled as if burned. Nia, please. We are family. You can't let him go to jail for assault. He is just hurt. We can fix this. I will leave, Richard. I promise. I will come back to Marcus. We can pay you back. Just don't let the police take us. I looked at her with pure disgust. You think you can negotiate? You have nothing to trade, Emily. You are the architect of this disaster. And frankly, watching my brother finally land a punch is the most impressive thing he has done in years. On the floor, Richard had managed to shove Marcus off. He was bleeding from the nose, his perfect silver hair a mess. Marcus was gasping for air, his knuckles bruised, his suit torn. That is enough, I said. My two security guards stepped forward. They didn't need to run. They moved with the efficiency of machines. One grabbed Marcus by the back of his collar and hauled him to his feet as if he weighed nothing. The other pinned Richard against the wall. Let me go, Marcus shouted, struggling uselessly against the guard's grip. I will kill him. You aren't killing anyone, Marcus, I said. You are leaving. I walked over to where he was dangling in the guard's grip. He looked pathetic. His tie was crooked, his lip was bleeding, and his eyes were wild with panic. Look at you, I said softly. The big man, the partner. Is this what success looks like to you, Nia? He sobbed, the fight draining out of him. I am sorry. I didn't know. Help me, please. I have nowhere to go. Mama can't help me. The house is gone. I have nothing. I looked at him. I searched for any feeling of pity in my heart. I searched for the sister who used to cover for him when he broke a window. I searched for the woman who cooked him gumbo last night. But she wasn't there. She had been evicted a long time ago. You have your pride, Marcus, I said, cold as ice. And you have a cardboard box waiting for you at the security desk downstairs. I suggest you fill it before I change my mind about the police. I turned to the guards. Escort Mr. Brooks and Miss Miller out of the building. Take their badges. If they try to re-enter, arrest them for trespassing. Wait! Emily shrieked as the guard grabbed her arm. My purse. My keys. We will mail them to you, I said, turning my back on them. Assuming you have a forwarding address that isn't a jail cell. The guards dragged them toward the door. Marcus was weeping openly now, a broken, sobbing sound that echoed off the glass walls. Emily was cursing, screaming that she would sue me, that she would tell everyone I was a monster. I watched them go. I watched the elevator doors slide open. I watched my brother look back at me one last time, his eyes begging for a salvation I refused to give. The doors closed. The room fell silent again. The only sound was Richard Sterling's heavy breathing as he slumped against the wall, wiping blood from his nose with a silk handkerchief. He looked at me, attempting a charming smile through the blood. Well, Ms. Brooks, he wheezed. That was intense. But I am glad you stepped in. Now about the transition. Since I am the minority shareholder now, I assume we can discuss my severance package. I have a golden parachute clause that… I didn't let him finish. I walked back to the head of the table. I picked up the cream-colored document David had placed there. The termination letter. I slid it across the table toward him. Parachute, I asked, raising an eyebrow. Richard, you seem to be confused. He looked at the letter. His smile vanished. We acquired the company, Richard, I said. But we didn't acquire you. This is a termination for cause. Gross negligence, corporate malfeasance, and conspiring to defraud a partner. But The contract, he stammered. Your contract was with Blue Sky, I said. Blue Sky doesn't exist anymore. It is a subsidiary of Onyx. And at Onyx we take out the trash. I pointed to the door. You can walk out or my guards can carry you out. But either way, Richard, you are leaving my building, and you are leaving empty-handed. He stared at me for a long moment, realizing that the game was truly over. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He just shrank. He grabbed his jacket and limped toward the door, a defeated old man who had underestimated the wrong woman. When he was gone, I stood alone in the center of the boardroom. The junior executives were still pressed against the wall, looking terrified that they were next. I looked at them. Clean this up, I said, gesturing to the broken glass and the water on the table, and get back to work. We have a company to save. I turned and walked toward the window, looking out at the city of Chicago. The sun was high in the sky now, bathing the room in a harsh, revealing light. I felt lighter. The weight of 29 years of abuse, of silence, of being the scapegoat had been lifted. I looked at my reflection in the glass. The white suit was pristine. My head was held high. I wasn't Nia the sister anymore. I wasn't Nia the help. I was Nia Brooks, CEO. And the view from the top was spectacular. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom clicked shut behind me, sealing the toxicity inside. I stood in the reception area for exactly 3 seconds, breathing in the scent of filtered air and victory. The receptionist with the gum stopped chewing and stared at me, confused by the sudden shift in my posture. I was no longer slouching. I was no longer making myself small. I reached up and pulled the pins from my hair, letting the long braids cascade down my back. Then, with a single fluid motion, I unbuttoned the cheap white blouse Emily had forced me to wear. Underneath, I was wearing a bespoke white suit from Alexander McQueen. It was sharp architectural and cost more than the collective student loans of everyone in that conference room. I stepped out of the black waitress skirt, revealing the matching white trousers. I kicked the sensible flats into the corner and slipped on the 4-inch stiletto heels I had stashed in my briefcase. The elevator doors at the end of the hall slid open. My team stepped out. It was a formation that would have made the Secret Service jealous. 4 lawyers in charcoal suits led by David, my lead counsel, who looked like a pit bull in a necktie. Flanking them were 2 security guards, massive men with necks as thick as tree trunks and earpieces coiled behind their ears. They didn't smile. They didn't speak. They just fell into step behind me as I turned back toward the boardroom. I checked my watch. 9:05. Inside that room, Marcus had just signed the document. I knew it. I could feel it in my bones. He had signed his name on the line that transferred all liability to him. The trap had snapped shut. Now it was time to collect the pelt. I walked toward the double glass doors. I didn't rush. I walked with the rhythm of a predator who knows the prey has nowhere to run. Click, click, click. The sound of my heels on the marble floor was the only warning they were going to get. David handed me a thick folder. The red one. The one with the photos. "Ready, Ms. Brooks?" he asked, his voice low. "Kick the door down, David," I said. He didn't literally kick it, but he might as well have. He pushed the double doors open with enough force that they bounced against the magnetic stops with a thunderous bang. The sound sucked the oxygen right out of the room. Time seemed to slow down. I saw everything in high-definition frames. I saw Marcus' pen still hovering over the paper, his mouth half open in a laugh that died in his throat. I saw Emily holding her glass of water, her eyes widening as they landed on my white suit. I saw Richard Sterling, the color draining from his face as he recognized the lawyers behind me. I walked in. I didn't walk to the side. I didn't walk to the corner. I walked straight down the center of the room toward the head of the table. My team fanned out behind me, a wall of dark suits framing my white silhouette. Marcus was the first to find his voice, though it cracked like a teenager's. "Naya, what the hell are you doing?" He stood up, knocking his chair back. "We are in the middle of a meeting. Get out, and why are you dressed like that?" I didn't answer him. I didn't even look at him. I looked at Richard Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice projecting clearly to every corner of the room. I believe you are sitting in my chair. Richard stammered, looking from me to the security guards. Excuse me. Who are you, security? Get this woman out of here. The security guards didn't move. They just stared at him with bored indifference. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. Nia, are you deaf? Get out. You are embarrassing me. This is the most important moment of my life, and you are playing dress-up. David stepped forward. He placed a briefcase on the table with a heavy thud. He opened it and pulled out a single document on thick, cream-colored linen paper. Mr. Brooks, Mr. Sterling. David announced, his baritone voice silencing the room. Please remain seated. The ownership of Blue Sky Agency has changed hands as of 2 minutes ago. Richard laughed nervously. That is impossible. The investors aren't even here yet. We are waiting for the wire transfer. The wire transfer is complete, David said. He slid the document toward Richard. Onyx Holdings has acquired 100% of the assets, debts, and operational control of Blue Sky Agency. Richard froze. He looked at the document. He looked at the signature at the bottom. Then he looked at me. His eyes bulged. Onyx Holdings, he whispered. That is a shell corp. Who owns Onyx? David smiled, a shark showing its teeth. May I introduce the founder and managing partner of Onyx Holdings, Ms. Nia Brooks. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had landed but hadn't detonated yet. Marcus looked at David. Then he looked at me. He blinked once, twice, as if his brain was refusing to process the visual data. Nia, he asked, his voice small. You... He looked at Emily for help. Emily's hand was shaking so hard, the water in her glass was creating a tsunami. She tried to set the glass down, but she missed the coaster. The glass tipped over. Ice water spilled across the polished mahogany table, soaking the papers Marcus had just signed. No, Emily whispered. No, that is not possible. She is a secretary. She drives a used car. She lives in that old house. She doesn't have money. Marcus latched onto that thought like a lifeline. Yeah, he said, his confidence rushing back in a frantic wave. This is a prank, right? Did you hire these actors? Nia, is this your idea of a joke because I didn't let you be a partner? You bought a fancy suit and hired some guys to scare us. You are broke. Nia, you couldn't buy a lemonade stand, let alone a company. I walked around the table. I stopped right behind Richard's chair. I placed my hand on the backrest. Get up, Richard, I said softly. Richard looked at the document again. He saw the bank authorization code. He saw the seal of the state. He knew real power when he saw it. He scrambled out of the chair so fast he almost tripped over his own feet. I sat down. I crossed my legs. I clasped my hands on the table right next to the puddle of water Emily had made. I looked down the long table at my brother. He was still standing, looking wild-eyed and sweaty. Sit down, Marcus, I commanded. He sat. It was instinct. Where did you get the money? He demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and fear. Who gave you the money? Did you steal it? Is that why you wanted access to the accounts? I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that made the junior executives flinch. Steal it? No, Marcus. I earned it. While you were busy spending your stipend on bottle service and pretending to be a rapper, I was building a portfolio. While you were begging Mama for gas money, I was closing mergers in Tokyo and London. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. You asked where the money came from. It came from the deals you were too busy to read about. It came from the market trends you were too arrogant to study. It came from the intelligence you thought I lacked because I didn't have a corner office. I picked up the soaking wet contract he had signed. You see, brother, you called me a secretary. You called me the help. You said I couldn't understand big business. I tossed the wet paper back at him. It splattered water onto his expensive suit. Well, the secretary just bought your boss. The help just bought the building. And the sister you called worthless just wrote a check for $2 million to buy your debt. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish on a dock gasping for air. Emily finally spoke. Her voice was shrill, desperate. Nia, wait. If you own the company, that is great. That is amazing. We can keep it in the family. Marcus is the senior partner now. You heard Richard. He signed the papers. We can run this together, you and Marcus, the Brooks dynasty. I looked at Emily. I looked at the fake diamond ring on her finger. I looked at the way she was already trying to pivot to latch onto the new host now that the old one was dead. The Brooks dynasty, I repeated, tasting the words. That sounds lovely, Emily. Except for one small problem. What she asked, her smile trembling. I reached for the red folder David had placed on the table. I don't partner with people who steal from me, I said. I opened the folder. And I definitely don't partner with people who are sleeping with the former CEO to frame my brother for embezzlement. I slid the first 8x10 glossy photo across the wet table. It slid perfectly, stopping right in front of Marcus. It was the photo of Emily kissing Richard in the hotel lobby. The room gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the lungs of everyone present. Marcus looked down. He stared at the photo. He stared at his wife. He stared at his boss. And then finally, the golden child broke. This journey taught me that shared DNA is not a license for abuse. For years, I allowed the guilt of family loyalty to silence my voice, believing that love meant enduring disrespect. But I learned that true family supports your growth. They do not anchor you to the ground. Cutting ties with toxic relatives is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of self-preservation. My worth was never defined by their validation, and my success is sweeter because I built it on my own terms. Sometimes the most expensive thing you will ever buy is your own freedom, but it is worth every penny. If you have ever had to choose your dignity over your family's expectations, hit that like button and share your story in the comments below. Subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your power.